Wow, I'm so jazzed right now. Like, thanks for coming through. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
so,
Absolutely.
it's such an honor to have
Thanks
you
for
on
having me.
here.
Thank
Oh
you. Thank
man,
you. It's an honor to be
it's
here.
um especially celebrating the 100 year of Black History, and yeah, especially on this channel. Like, I'm just really stoked. Like, seriously, um, man, I I have a long introduction for you. I'm gonna try to do the Reader's Digest, but you've done so much, it's kind of hard for me to do that. So if I miss anything, please forgive me.
You're good.
So, all of you cats and catettes, come through. Thank you for coming out. Really appreciate you guys. Black History of Rock and Roll. Sorry, I'm chewing my licorice root and it's like coming out.
Yeah.
Dara Star Tucker is an amazing musician, singer, songwriter, filmmaker, blogger, journalist, and social commentator. She um, has done a lot. Like, seriously, you guys, where do I start? She has a jazz vocalist award of the year at Nashville's Industry Music Awards. I'm sorry. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm like freezing up. She she won an award for Nashville Music Awards in 2016 and 2017. Also, she won Album of the Year for her album Oklahoma Rain, Jazz Album of the Year. Born in Oklahoma to amazing musician parents, Doyle and Linda Tucker. They also have a foundation, which we're going to talk about as well. Um, Also, she comes from a whole family of gospel musicians and has been doing this since she was 4. And her music and commentaries have been featured on Ebony, HBO, Hulu, OWN Network, Revolt TV, and Jet. And if I've missed anything, please let me know. Oh, I did. If you guys don't know, you guys got to catch her on not if you're out here in LA, catch her on Stevie Wonder's radio station KJLH, with her show called The Front Page, and also she has a series called The Breakdown, as well as a podcast with Craig Bryant called All Over the Place. So welcome, Dara Star Tucker.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
The reason I have you coming on here um, is definitely musical, but I loved your rock and roll video that you put out on YouTube, and it's everybody should watch that. There's a lot of things that people don't realize when they think of this music and its origins. And I love the way that you pieced everything together and you showed the gradual like way that rock and roll came through all of our music traditions that we've had in this country as Black Americans, you know. And I just want to expound off of that. I have a bunch of questions, and you know, based on that, as far as like just the history of rock and roll, who invented rock and roll, its appropriation, and also just things on the DNA of rock and roll and how it still leads to us. You know, I'm curious, just what made you make that video?
Well, I'm a musician and I am an aspiring woodworker. I appreciate that. And I think I'm freezing up here for some reason. Can you still see me? Are we good?
Yeah, I can see you.
Someone says an aspiring woodworker. Absolutely.
Wow.
Learning new things all the time. I just came from my little woodshed. But yeah, I'm a musician, and so I have always had an interest in the history of that art form. And that's one of the ways that I understand the world. It's one of the ways that I understand Black history. And so, I too was a kind of a victim, I guess, of the American educational system in that I didn't understand where a lot of that music came from. There was a
Mm.
lot of music that I really appreciated as a younger person. And I'm not saying that, people like Elvis or Buddy Holly or Alan Freed are not important to the history, Bill Haley or whomever, but it has its place. And so when I began to study Black history and really educate myself, as I was educating other people, then it was important for me to also do that with music, because that's my field, that's my vocation. And so I was just examining, a lot of the music that I love and where it comes from and what the influences are. And when you really start digging around, it gets pretty deep, to understand just how that has been siphoned away from us. And the credit often is not given. So that's a history that I'm deeply interested in.
I love the fact that you said, I'm going to quote you on what you said, even in that. Rock and roll is a byproduct of the Black American experience up into including the appropriation of its essence. And also, I like the fact that you said Black struggle invented rock and roll. Black artistry, black pain, black joy, black black heartache are at its core. Rock is the earth child of the black experience in America. And that's, I think that's lost on a lot of people now, even with the fact that, you know, a lot of us got appropriated out of it, and I'm going to expound on that too, to the point where, and I'm quoting a rock musician by the name of Nicky Buzz, who was in a few different, pre-punk bands, Band Sun, and also the heavy metal band Vendetta, to the point where he goes to a radio station. I guess the guy didn't see how he looked. And basically, when the guy found out, he broke the guy's record and said, "We don't play N-word music here." So stuff like that is very concerning. And I've interviewed people on this page and talked about their experiences when it comes to things of that nature and how hard they had to even go to just do what they love, something that comes from our own.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that just it's just a trip to even see things like that happen, to the point where there had to be a Black Rock coalition to basically combat that. Shouts to Mr. Tate and Vernon Reed and Bevis Griffin, who I've also interviewed. But yeah, what do you think about that, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I think, like I said, there is just a lot of ignorance, I think, with people not really understanding that music that they love has African influences or African American influences. And you can think, oh no, I prefer this kind of music or that kind of music. There's very little music in the US, other than maybe classical music, that is not influenced by African traditions. And
Mm,
even, contemporary classical writers are often influenced by African American music. And so yeah, our influence is pervasive. It was one of the first ways that we began to affect American culture. So you can't get away from it. It really doesn't matter what you're listening to. There are African rhythms in Bad Bunny's music.
yep.
So, and there are African influences in African American influences in country music, which is, why it was kind of funny to see them go and present their own version of, what the real American Super Bowl halftime show was. And it's like, well, even the music that you're presenting wouldn't exist in the way that it does if it were not for our influence. And so you can't get away from it. You can't escape it. It's just, it's interwoven into the culture, and more people need to understand that.
That's yep. I'm totally on that. Man, I dig this. I love talking about this. How important, you being a gospel singer and having those roots, and I've had conversations on this too, by the way, but I know you're even more involved in that. How important is gospel to rock and roll?
Well, that was one of the earliest influences right there. It was spiritual songs and hymns and yes, the old Negro spirituals. Those songs were being sung as soon as we landed on these shores. And so that influence, along with field songs and the blues, those are the earliest influences on American music. And so, when you hear any kind of syncopation at all, you are hearing the influence of Black music. But yeah, gospel music was what we carried with us. And of course, us being kind of integrated and indoctrinated into the American religious tradition, and we kind of developed our own thing within that. And yeah, it has been as influential as anything has been.
Does the DNA of blues and gospel exist in rock and roll and pop music of today as we know?
I hear it less. I think that the separation started to happen even in our own music, even in black music that we think of as black music now, like R&B and hip hop. And you're hearing a little less of that traditional influence of
Mm.
where the music came from, that beat that we came here with. And that's, I'm saddened by that. I feel like a lot of music is becoming more detached from the human experience as far as I'm concerned. You're hearing fewer real instruments, a lot of canned music, a lot of auto tune. It's becoming more mechanical. It's becoming more dependent on synthetic means, computers, and we're becoming more detached from our humanity, I feel like, and that's being expressed in our music. But there is plenty of music now being made that is very much influenced by African rhythms and African chord structures, harmonies, African expression. Yeah, there's still a lot being made.
Now, this one is something that I've been, and I'm gonna eventually do a video on this or write about it because it's been a long coming. And I'm trying to stay out. I get so amped up with conversations like this. Sometimes I'll ask two questions in one, but I'm really trying not to. So with this one, actually, I have my own theories on this, but I just want to know what you think about it. And if you want, I'll even tell you later if you want to hear mine. There has been a concerted effort or assumption to excuse away blues from rock genres like heavy metal and punk rock. Um, Basically saying that I've heard things where it's just like certain people that are now I would consider mouthpieces for these genres will say, I won't even say that. This people that I've heard, they'll say like punk is like the widest form of rock music, or they'll say like heavy metal. The latest argument is them trying to take it away from bands like Black Sabbath and Zeppelin and even Hendrix. Like to say that metal started. What makes a metal song is without blues. Like it loses the blues with Judas Priest. But the ironic thing about that is that Rob Halford even said that Howlin' Wolf, the essence of Howlin' Wolf still exists in heavy metal, bands. And for me, well, man, I just want your answer on that, and I'll tell you my theory. I'm like excited talking about this, so I kind of go on a tangent. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, you can't take that influence away entirely because it's at the foundation. It's at the foundation, and so it wouldn't exist without Howlin' Wolf. It wouldn't exist without Robert Johnson. It wouldn't exist without those early blues artists. And so it cannot be untethered from that. But I can understand why someone would say, there's a difference between Jimi Hendrix and maybe a lot of the metal bands that came after who were imitating or taking a cue from what he did and imitating that and commenting on it. You hear less of the influence, but it's never going to, you can never extract it because it is at its core, it's at its essence. So no, it's not gone, but it's definitely less recognizable. I would say that. Yeah.
I always say things like this when it comes to just even the framework of rock and roll. Metal guys still use those same blues, R&B, and gospel beats.
Hmm.
Even when it comes to just the what people are calling shrill vocals. That was heavily influenced by like a lot of gospel. I mean, Little
Yeah.
Richard. I mean,
Yeah.
Lemmy from Motorhead. Like that was like one of his icons. Little Richard. I mean, people like Screaming Jay Hawkins, and we could talk about a lot of different people. Mahalia Jackson, of course. You could hear that even with her. Even though like she's traditionally gospel, but
Hmm.
that that shrill vocal style that people that scared the hell literally out of people
Yeah.
is rooted in gospel. And even when they started, people like Ronnie James Dio and even Freddie Mercury, when they started fusing a lot of that stuff with the opera stuff, it still was in the same rock and roll framework where it's just like you're bringing other elements into a framework that traditionally isn't that. Like so I still see it, and even I like a lot of extreme metal. I see that is still even an extension of it, even though people would be like, no, it isn't. and that's a whole other conversation, you know.
Mhm.
Um, which I actually had another question that kind of goes along with this. Rock and roll has a framework, even when other genres like classical are introduced. That framework was established by black artists. I'm just, you kind of expounded on that, but I'm just curious, just, yeah, if you don't mind, like, I think you already answered it, but I still want to,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when American artists tackle the classical genre, let's say someone like Leonard Bernstein, it's difficult for them to not express that influence of African music or African American music. It would be impossible for them not to, to have that included as a part of that expression, simply because they've been surrounded by it their entire lives. There's a difference between what American classical composers, after the 20th century or something sound like, versus what European classical composers sounded like, a Bach or a Brahms or whatever. So there's a big difference between them and Leonard Bernstein or other contemporary classical composers. So yeah, our influence is in everything. As I said, it's impossible to extract it from the American musical experience.
yeah, it's very interesting too when you think about it. Like, you know, I love the fact that rock and roll still has that energy, no matter how you do it. And it's the same energy that got it banned. And a lot of it, people, you can watch those old clips where they're like, demonizing it just be on racial bounds. Even from what I remember reading, also, our gospel music was demonized by, racist type people, by
Mhm.
a white supremacist structure because they
Mhm.
thought it was like animalistic or whatever. They put it in race music. They did the same thing with blues, jazz, and even R&B, rock and roll type stuff. And it's
Mhm.
just when you now it's funny that it's appropriated. Cats kind of try to excuse away that stuff um, when it comes to just things that were added. Like another key example is progressive rock. A lot of people think that it was just European, or just classical. When it's in a rock and roll frame, it's just like you can't get away from that ragged sound or that spirit that that started it. Even if no matter how complex you made it, made it. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So I'm just curious, like,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. Am I frozen here?
man,
I
yeah, this thing
Okay.
buffers a lot.
I think I'm back. I think I'm back here. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's, as I said, it's the influence is pervasive. I can't think of one single style of music that would not carry that influence. But you have to know, you have to know the history. You have to know what you're listening for. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily listen critically. They know what they like and they know what they don't like, but they're not necessarily going and studying the history of it. And I was, I can't be too critical of that because there were many years where I just knew what I liked and what I didn't like. And I wasn't questioning where things came from. I just thought, okay, this just came up out of the earth. And, Bing Crosby or whatever, he liked to sing in this syncopated sort of way, or, boogie woogie. It just sprung up from nowhere. And it wasn't until I really started to study where that came from that I understood. It's like, no, they were pulling that from somewhere and not necessarily giving credit. But, a lot of these singers, these writers were going and hanging out in clubs in Harlem, and they were picking up on what we were doing and then taking it back and putting it in the music or putting it in films or whatever. But they just weren't necessarily giving credit to where it came from. And then, yeah, demonizing it and making it sound like it was, if it was coming from us, then it was evil. It was from the devil. These blue notes, they were literally like devilish notes. Where did these notes come from? Yeah, I did a whole thing on Henry Ford, a couple of videos, I think, on Henry Ford, and how he felt that the Jewish influence, was attempting to bring black music to the world, because we don't talk enough about the role that Jewish people played in bringing black music influences to the world. George Gershwin writing Porgy and Bess, and we can have our criticisms of some of that music or some of those expressions, but they played the role of a bridge between black culture, black musical culture, and Black culture in general, and white America, and helped to bring our influence to the world. But yeah, Henry Ford, he definitely saw the connection, but he felt that it was purposeful, and he felt that it was evil at its core, and it was supposed to cause the the destruction of this country, that the deterioration of this country was going to come through Jewish people introducing black music to white waspy America. So yeah, it's been vilified from the start.
Yeah, my friend Truth Savior, who you should check out, and you guys would have an amazing conversation. He actually has a channel. He's here. Shouts to Truth Savior. One
Hi
of my
there.
aside from you, he's one of my favorites to watch, and he has a lot of rad information on music. He does a lot of jazz and hip hop stuff as well. And you guys should meet. You guys should do a live together, because he's just, man. I have to give him a shout out, and shout to all you guys that have made it here, and I really appreciate you guys. As far as like checking this out, it's funny that you say that too. The first person that popped in my head was Kurt Weill.
Hmm.
His interpretation of street scene, and how I think that was the first opera that I ever heard that used Black American vernacular. And I tripped out. I'm like, I did that meme with the question mark, like.
Right.
But even in that regards, like, here's another question to even ask that goes along with that, and it's about Sam Phillips, and I'm just gonna quote quote this, and I know you know the quote. Sam Phillips comment, the Sam Phillips comment: "If I could find a white man with that Negro feel, then I could make $1 billion." You think it was nefarious, or just crossing over the music, or anything else? What comes to mind when reading that statement? Because that's a statement that, yeah, that's a whole conversation. And in regards to rock and roll, and just black people's experience with being appropriated. But I'm sorry, I could go on. Let me have you answer. I'm like
Yeah,
too
I mean,
excited to talk about this.
I think he was a businessman. I think he was right. Clearly, he was right in that when he did find Elvis, who was a white man who could bring a black musical expression to the fore. When he finally found that person, he did make a million. He made millions of dollars, and so did Elvis. And so, yeah, I fully understand why he felt that way. He wasn't wrong, and it's still going on now. And it's just an outflow of what the makeup of this country is. You got to appeal to young white girls. They're looking for someone that they can, that they can crush on, and that's, I mean, like you said, Howlin' Wolf literally scared people. um it's not necessarily, he wasn't necessarily going to be, Louis Jordan wasn't necessarily going to be that matinee idol that little 15-year-old girls could have a crush on and put on their wall. It wasn't going to be that kind of thing. And so he had to find that spirit and that sound in a package that was more acceptable to mainstream America. And it's, like I said, it's still going on. We've still got Justin Timberlake and Justin Bieber, and any, and Robin Thicke, and any number of white artists. Um, who is it? Iggy? Is it Iggy Azalea? Am I thinking? Who are packaging black music in a presentation that is more acceptable to white America. So it's a winning formula. I think we can all agree it is a winning formula.
It reminds me of what Gil Scott Heron wrote in his poem, "Ain't Nothing New." He even expounded off of what you said. He's all, I won't say exactly what he said, but if you're familiar, he's all, they didn't want, like, no white women crushing over over Chuck Berry, so they got
Right,
Elvis. Like, he
right.
didn't use the word crushing, but you could only, if you know the song, you know the song. And it was a whole thing. And that brings up another thing. You know, they literally tried to segregate audience back then on the dance floor. I have a quote that I actually made up. They couldn't do it on the dance floor, so they did it with the industry. And I think, like basically they did it with marketing in an effort to exclude black artists from this genre of music. In my personal opinion, I'm curious because that's what happened. And it's one of the reasons that I always, even on this page, I cover the earlier people. I cover, Andre Williams and Gorey Carter, as well as Memphis Minnie and Rosetta Tharpe. But I really focus on 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s because people thought that we were non-existent. I'm kind of a part of that because of what I've done, but like this goes beyond me. It's just there's a lot of things that were going on, and I really it was hard for like a lot of us to even play this music, without any opposition. So I'm curious what you think about that, especially the segregation aspect, because that really started, I think, in the 60s, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't know if I fully understand the question, but I think there was a point where black music, I guess, started to go in its own way. I think that probably happened right around Motown, the early 60s when Motown came along. And, we really were not as invested overtly in the rock and roll genre as we had been before. I mean, there was a period early on where you had people like Chuck Berry who were playing, you know, generally the same genre as someone like, Richie Valens or whatever. It all kind of, lived together. But yeah, the early 60s, I think things started to become more defined really with the British invasion and with this with Motown, and then we kind of diverged on our own tracks again. So I think that early period of rock and roll was probably a very special time in that we kind of were all existing. There was a genre where black and white folks were doing a little bit of the same thing, but it just didn't last any more than about 10 years. And we, R&B kind of became our thing, and a lot of it after that became a bit um, ghettoized, as they say. And that whole idea of race music or Negro music kind of began to express itself in a different way. Definitely more money behind it, but I think white people kind of took that rock and roll thing after the British invasion, and they kind of went with it, and it became their music a bit. And I know that can be frustrating for a lot of black rock and roll artists, people who really do consider themselves to truly be rock and roll artists. I think Ike and Tina Turner actually held it down well, very well in the 60s and the early part of the 70s, but they would be one of the few groups that I could point to that really made their mark. And I don't even know that they really received much airplay on rock and roll, what would be thought of as rock stations. They were probably still thought of as R&B back then, but they did have much more of a harder sound than most black groups did at that time.
I guess what my question, just to you know, expound on that too, is like a lot of times I've heard like, well, it's marketing. Like even when you think of a person like Nile Rodgers, I remember an interview with him where he was saying that he was in the band Big Apple, which became Chic, before they were actually a jazz rock band, and he sent some demos in, from what I understand, and they basically kind of was like, we can't have you, playing this kind of music. We can't market this because you're black. And I've heard other things where it's just like other artists have expressed that. Even like when did Kenna come out? I think Kenna came out in like the early 2000s. They didn't want him to show his face because he's a black dude.
Mm.
And he put the album, that's why he titled it Show My Face. But there's tons of examples like that where it's just like the marketing thing. I've heard, shouts to the homie like the homie from Sound Barrier. He, Spacey T was talking about how, I'm not gonna listen to the rock and roll dude, but there's an interview on how like their management couldn't accept him because he was black, and they didn't know how this particular rocker's audience would deal with that. So that's the thing that I'm saying, like, and there were tons of rock artists back then. I mean, we had groups like Love, which were a mixed band. We have groups like the Chambers Brothers, obviously, and of course we know Jimmy. They couldn't. They they could not ignore him, man. Like, and he pretty much changed the face of music. I mean, and it's so cool to see now, like there's bands like Death, like groups like Pure Hell who've been around, for a long time and had an impact on punk in not only Philly but New York, the UK, and also like in LA. But it seems like a lot of it, people will say it's the marketing thing. So I'm not doubting anything that you're saying. Everything that you're saying, I get that. Yeah, that happened, but it's kind of messed up. At least from a person that's been into this stuff for a while and know people that were into this stuff before me, and listening to what they've gone through, how even the marketing seems very racist in that regard. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's just my opinion.
I don't know from an industry standpoint. I know that there was one band when I was a kid that broke through in called Living Color with that song
Yes.
Cult of Personality. I'm sure you remember that. But I'm sure there comes a point if Black people are not associated with the rock and roll genre, after a point, it's like, almost like a Darius Rucker thing. He was able to break through because he was the exception to the rule. So from a marketing standpoint, if you have a group like Living Color who is doing something that not very many Black bands are doing, or at least we're not seeing that in the mainstream, then there comes a point where it can actually become an advantage. It's like, oh, okay, well, you're different. They're all
Mm,
the rock and roll bands and the hair bands and stuff that were popular when I was a kid. Um, we're white. And so
yeah.
when that Cult of Personality song hit, it was like, what? We were all, just minds blown. And so there's a way to market it, I suppose, but I'm not even going to claim to be an expert in the the contemporary rock and roll genre. But yeah, I remember watching a documentary on that band called Death during the pandemic, and got to be familiar with them. Yeah, and hearing their story was just amazing. It was really amazing to know that you know that it's just totally hidden, from us.
That movie made me cry. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna lie.
yeah,
I was like, man, dude, like,
it's crazy.
oh, yeah, Living Color is amazing too. And Vernon Reed, he was one of the guys that founded the BRC because of a lot of the discrimination against black bands, and him
Yeah.
and Bevis and um, Greg Tate, like, they formed that just because they were in. I'm glad that Living Color got that, I mean, as a kid, and my dad was really proactive in just feeding me just artists that looked like myself, like he was also a musician. It's
Hmm.
just amazing, like, that. I'm glad that they broke through. I mean, they also pay tribute to groups like the Bad Brains, who are like one of my favorite bands, and who are more underground even back then, more hardcore and stuff. But as you're saying, that's an interesting take. I just think that it's an interesting thing just to see like how that happened, like just as far as like the lineage of rock and how it got shifted, and just things that have taken on it, but
Hmm.
yeah. you know um
Yeah.
Man, are we doing good on time? I didn't know if you like needed to be anywhere.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay, cool. Man, I have to ask this. I love your take on the and me and my homeboy Ogun Prime, Brian. I don't know his last name, but he went by Ogun Prime for a while. We talked about like basically like the beginnings of rock and roll, and I love the fact that, and Brian would love to see your video with this too. He actually said Louis Jordan definitely was, because I started actually covered Memphis Minnie, and she was like in the 20s, and I talk about Rosetta Tharpe. I'm just curious, like, just for the audience, even though I've seen your video, like, why Louis Jordan was important.
Mm. Louis Jordan was kind of that bridge between early blues and jump music, and then the rock and rollers. When they came along, I think his name has been really lost to history. It took my husband, Greg Bryant, kind of really illuminating that for me. I have to give him credit for really making me aware of Louis Jordan. But if you kind of go back and watch some of his performances and listen to what he was doing with jump blues, kind of in the mid to late 40s, you'll hear a lot of the DNA of those early rock and rollers. Like everything they were doing came from him. It really
Mm.
did, and he was the one that really put that. He kind of took it out of those kind of dirty, muddy blues, and he gave it a real kind of a beat, and really gave it some life and some joy, and I think gave a lot of folks the idea to bring that to the masses, and for that to become kind of youthful expression. That was really what Louis Jordan did that hadn't quite been done before he did it. Is that it felt joyful, and it felt fun, and it felt youthful, and there was just a little bit of that edge that was not quite there, because like I said, it was the mid 40s, mid to late 40s when he really was doing his thing. But when they got a hold of that early 50s, and maybe just put kind of a crunchy guitar on it, that Elmore James kind of guitar with it, it took off and became its own thing. So yeah, he really is should be acknowledged, I think, as the godfather of rock and roll.
That's so cool. Yeah, like it's always cool to know about our forebears. I mean, you mentioned Elmore James. Man, that guy was
Hmm.
heavy, dude. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's
And he
like
deserves his
him,
credit as well. Yeah.
man, like him, Pat Hare, of course Willie Keysart, and Willie Johnson, who played with Howlin' Wolf. Those guys are like the forebearers of really heavy distortion.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like just,
Yeah.
and there's a few others too that I'm like, man, like there's Joe Hill's another one. Yeah, that guy, and of course Rosetta Tharpe. Who could, man?
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
remember the first
absolutely.
time I found out about Rosetta Tharpe, and I saw that video. Dude, I was dying laughing because she's dressed all traditional. You wouldn't even think that this chick was gonna cut heads, man. She was cutting
Yeah.
that stuff up, man. I'm like, on a Gibson. I'm like, man, yeah, man. So
Yeah.
and even like getting back to Memphis Minnie, like most of the stuff I've heard is like just kind of heard by herself, but it still kind of had that life thing, like kind of that upbeat tempo to some, or just not as traditional blues per se, even though of course it's still blues. But I like the fact that she said that about Louis Jordan, because it did seem more joyful and not like, it wasn't like, of course it has the DNA of blues, but it was more like kind of like just more upbeat. It's that gospel thing, it's like,
Yeah.
like again, it's that. And man, it's a trip.
Yeah.
Man, speaking of that, I'm curious about like just your influences on music, and also I've read that that your whole family is into music, and plus you started playing that and touring like since you were like really small. Like I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I was raised in a very musical family. My father, Doyle Tucker, was a gospel musician, a singer, a writer. He was a music minister at several churches, and that's kind of how we grew up. He's a piano player and prolific writer. So that was my whole world. He would take us around, and we were his little choir. I had six brothers and sisters, and we would back him up, and we eventually started singing on our own, and I started playing well enough to accompany us, and started writing a little bit later on. But yeah, that was kind of our acclamation. His mother was a pastor, and we would go around to different satellite churches of hers all through Oklahoma, and then we moved to many different places throughout my childhood. But I grew up singing three-part harmony with my brothers and sisters, and I always say we were kind of like the little black Von Trapp children. And I had to kind of learn how to be out front when I started doing my own thing, because singing harmony and singing, with my brothers and sisters, singing in choirs and that kind of thing, that was my musical training. That was where it started for me. But it was all gospel. We were not allowed to listen to any secular music, even though I would sneak away and listen to my, whatever it was I was listening to, the Carpenters or Nat King Cole or, whoever. Um, Rosemary Clooney or whatever I was listening to, but I would sneak and put that stuff under my pillow at night and just listen. I would record things off at the television, and my world was expanding at 11, 12, 13 years old. But yeah, I found the music that spoke to me.
So cool. And you have an amazing voice. I dig. And it's funny, man. I didn't know that you actually play with what's his name? Charlie Hunter. My old band opened up for him back in the 90s.
Oh,
in Long Beach
wow.
State. Like the a band I was in called Homemade Gravy, we opened up for him. He played um at Long Beach State back in the day. I'm like, oh, cool, like. But your voice, I dig like what you do, man. And as a
Thank
matter of
you.
fact, what are you working on now?
Well, we just put out an album last year called Time Wouldn't Wait. So that just came out. I have a couple of shows coming up in Nashville and Atlanta on the 7th and 8th of March. So I'll be, yeah, performing at Rudy's in Nashville, and I'm not even sure where in Atlanta. But yeah, we're on the road, and then hopefully very soon we'll be getting back at it. I've got some ideas brewing for what the next project is going to be. We've always got something in the hopper, but I kind of want to take it back to my gospel roots a little bit, and then I want to do another originals album as well. So I've always got something brewing, always.
That's so cool. Very, very cool. And speaking of like your parents, I'm curious about um not only how inspirational they were for you, but also about the foundation that you started in honor of them.
Yeah, I was able to a couple of years ago. I did do through the I did a Doyle and Linda Tucker scholarship where I just raised some money and then helped a student with tuition. I really would like to initiate that again because that's one of the highest and greatest things that I can do to tribute them because they were both. My mother was an incredible singer. Linda Tucker was an incredible singer, minister in her own right. But I think that's probably one of the things that they would want us to do to honor their name and their memory and their dedication to music and to ministry. And so, yeah, I would love to be able to get to do that again, to distribute that scholarship once again.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, man. Like, and as a person that comes from a family, like my parents, like that was the first band that I was in, actually, and they were like, how could I say it? They're ministers too, but also like they mixed their style. Like, imagine if you dug on like Sade, Chaka Khan, and jazz fusion and stuff and mixed it all in together. That was my parents' group, Foolish Things, man. So, like,
Wow.
reading about like what you're doing, like your parents, and your family, it just kind of reminded me of that as well. And it really definitely inspired me too, like that's a beautiful thing, man. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
do you still work with like your brothers and sisters on projects or anything, or?
I don't get to sing with them a whole lot. Every once in a while, I put up a video at Christmas time. We'll just kind of do something silly and sing, or whatever we do, we go home. But or if there's some kind of a family gathering, our grandmother has a foundation there in Tulsa, and they do yearly gatherings to honor her or honor her ministry, and sometimes we'll perform at those. But yeah, I haven't gotten to do very much with them. I would love to do an actual project with them. That would be great. We'd love to do some of our dad's music and actually put that out on a project. So it's just so many ideas and so little time.
That's awesome. So cool. I forgot to ask you this at first, but you mentioned that you were born and grew up in Oklahoma. Did you have any family from Greenwood, or what part of Oklahoma, or?
Yeah, Tulsa. Yeah, Tulsa, Oklahoma is where I grew up. So that's, of course, where the race massacre happened. We didn't really grow up knowing a whole lot about that. They didn't really teach that in school when we were growing up, which is pretty crazy. That just probably the last 10 or 15 years, people have started talking about that, and thankfully, I think it is being taught now in schools. But with my father's family, I think they migrated to Tulsa in the mid '60s. So I don't think they were there at that time. My mother's family, I have yet to trace that history. So they very well could have been there, but I don't remember my great grandmother talking about it. And she was born in 1908, so even she would have been really young when that happened. But I don't know exactly the time period that they would have migrated to Tulsa specifically, but it's possible that they could have been there. But I would love to know that history on that side of the family.
Man, that's so, man, that's a heavy thing, man. And
Yeah.
yeah, in the last probably 10, 15 years is when I found out too.
Hmm.
It's something that we all need to keep in mind when it comes to the history of not only us as a people, but this country. Like
Hmm.
it's you know I'm glad that you do what you do, because you're preserving history, especially in this day and age where they're trying to ban our history, even though like they don't really teach our history. A lot of the stuff that I found out was on my own, and I was lucky to not. I mean, I was lucky to not only have my grandma as a little kid, you know, but also a Black history teacher in college that was really no chaser. And that had an effect on me, even to what I'm doing right now with this page.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Beautiful stuff. So, man, do you have any like thing that you want to plug? I'm so sorry. I'm overexcited to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm being
It's okay.
starstruck. Please forgive me, you guys. Like,
It's okay.
it's an honor to interview you. Seriously.
I really appreciate that. No, I like I said, I have a performance coming up in Nashville on the 7th of March, which is this place called Rudy's. And I think you can find them at rudysjazzroom.com if you're anywhere near Nashville. And then that performance on the 8th, it's on my website, darastartucker.com. You'll find more information about that performance on the 8th of March in Atlanta. But my album is out there. Time Wouldn't Wait. People can always go and find that. I hope they do. I've got a couple of music videos online you can find. So, I'm out there doing all the things. Of course, KGLH, I'm on every day. Tomorrow morning, I'll be there, kglhradio.com. You can listen to the front page. I'm on out here in the West Coast. It's 4:30 to 6 a.m. So if you're on the East Coast, it's a little more reasonable. It's 7:30 to 9, I think. So yeah, you can always tune in, and there are a lot of people who tune in across the country and listen to the show in the mornings. But yeah, if you're here, it's 102.3 here in Los Angeles.
Right in Inglewood. I know where it
Right.
is. I've been over there. Right across from Dulons. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Inglewood is awesome.
Yeah, it's a good city. It's a good city. Yeah,
Man,
it's yeah, we're having a lot of fun on the front page, and we tackle a lot of things. We tackle, tomorrow we'll be doing something called the conversation, where I'm just talking to my producer and the board operator, and we're just having various conversations about different things that affect our lives. And then through the week I have interviews with movers and shakers, and on Friday we have like a really fun kind of Freedom Friday show where we're just clowning around talking about whatever. So yeah, it's a fun show. The front page, it's a fun show.
that's awesome. So cool to
Yeah.
know, man. Oh, so I was we could definitely like and not unless you have any other social media to plug. And with that also, I always ask people for like advice as far as like just what would you give as an advice, like to people, and anything else you want to plug, you could rock that if you like.
Advice, not any great advice. There was a man that recently passed away, and I forgive me for not knowing his name, but he was on Grey's Anatomy. I don't watch, I think was he on Grey's Anatomy? The man that just passed away. And he had, I think, I don't remember what the illness that he had, but he put out a video that was supposed to air after he died. And one of the things that he wanted to tell his children was just to live in the moment, stay present in the moment. And it was a good reminder to me to just, appreciate the moment, appreciate the here and now, because it's really ultimately all we have is just right now. We have the people that are in our lives right now. We have the, whatever's in front of us. And I try to remember this as often as I can, to not get too far in the future. There's my sister Ray. Hi, Ray. To not get too far in the future, because that's where anxiety, ALS, thank you, anxiety and worry live in the future, and regret and shame live in the past. But if we stay in the present, and that is, it's a practice, and it's can be difficult to practice it. But staying present in the moment is where we can find peace, we can find joy, we can find love, happiness right here in the present moment. So that would be my advice to anyone, my advice to myself first, and then to anyone who's watching.
That's some very vital advice. Very
Hmm.
vital
Yeah,
advice, man. Very vital advice.
yeah,
Man. Well, I want to thank you for
absolutely,
coming on this platform. It's an honor. I'm like, sorry I got a little
absolutely.
ecstatic, like, but thanks a million. I really
Uh,
appreciate you. and keep rocking that madness. Thank you for all the stuff that you do. Um, and seriously, like, man, I don't even know what else to say. I'm like, here's the thing. I'm so stoked that like when I get cats like that want to even come on here, like it's just beyond me. Like I've had some really cool guests, man, and I'm blessed. Like, and you're just confirming that even more, man. Like I'm like, this is so cool. Like I'm just overexcited.
It's okay.
But thank you, thank
Thank you for your
thank you.
persistence. I appreciate that. You've been kind but persistent. So I appreciate that. It's good to finally make this happen.
Thank you. I know people get busy, like it's all
Yeah.
good, I get it, like and I'm sure with all the stuff that you do, and please, like if I missed anything, let me know. All the stuff that
No.
you've done and do, I know you're busy. So it's like, I appreciate you taking the time out and man,
Absolutely.
hopefully I'll see you around LA. I'm out here myself, I hang out in
Yeah.
Lamert Park, sometimes in Inglewood, in LBC where I'm from. So,
Yeah.
but God bless you and thank you. Thanks a million. Thanks to all of you
Absolutely.
guys. I really appreciate all of you guys coming out and rocking with us today. I'm more than honored and ecstatic. Man, you guys made my day more than Clint Eastwood, pun intended. Peace and blessings to you. Thank you, Dara. Thanks a lot. And shouts to all of you guys. Black history of rock and roll. Black history of rock and roll. Black history of rock and roll. Peace and blessing to you. Besame abo wawo pesca du sahadom like I mean. Peace.
All right. Peace. Thank you.